The emergency beacon died with a pathetic little wheeze, like someone's grandparent giving up on a crossword puzzle. Commander Zixthor of the Andromeda Coalition looked at the sparking remains of their communication array and made a sound that could only be described as existential dread mixed with mild indigestion. The 3-meter-tall insectoid officer had survived 14 campaigns across 9 star systems. According to YouTube analytics, 99.3% of viewers are not subscribed. That's a huge number. By subscribing the channel that is completely free, you'll help support the channel and never miss fresh content. But apparently, a Category 7 ion storm and a malfunctioning shuttle were going to be what finally broke him. "This is fine," he chittered to himself, mandibles clicking nervously. "This is completely fine." Narrator voice: "It was not, in fact, fine." The survival instructor, a Velkari named Instructor Ven, was doing what all experienced soldiers do in a crisis, pretending to have everything under control while internally screaming. Her crystalline features remained stoic as she surveyed the wreckage of their training shuttle, now decorating the landscape of planet designation F7749, colloquially known as that green death trap no one wants to visit. "Cadets," she announced, her voice carrying across the clearing with practiced authority. "We have experienced what I'm going to generously call a learning opportunity, instead of catastrophic failure of every system simultaneously." The 12 cadets from 6 different species stood in various states of panic. There was Kreechaw, the Zorgonian whose skin was turning a concerning shade of purple. Beside her, the 2 Plex twins, Mora and Vora, were making high-pitched whimpering sounds that echoed through their shared telepathic link. Instructor Zixthor was pretty sure that Jakar, the usually confident Dravian warrior, was trying not to cry. And then there was Corporal Emma Chen, the human. She was doing something that deeply confused everyone present. She was smiling. Not the kind of smile you give when you're trying to be brave. This was the smile of someone who had just found out the test was open book. The smile of someone who had accidentally prepared for exactly this scenario. The smile of someone who was, and this was the disturbing part, excited. "Oh no," Commander Zixthor muttered. He'd been part of the coalition long enough to learn one universal truth. When a human smiled in a bad situation, things were about to get weird. "Cadet Chen," Instructor Ven said carefully, "you seem remarkably calm for someone stranded on an uncharted planet with no supplies, no communication, and no immediate rescue." Emma shrugged, already eyeing the surrounding forest with the intensity of someone browsing a particularly interesting hardware store. "I mean, we've got trees. Water from that stream I can hear about 40 meters east, what looks like flint deposits in those rocks over there. And I'm pretty sure that's a cedar tree, which means tinder, kindling, and decent structural wood. Plus, the gravity's only 0.98 Earth standard, so that's actually pretty convenient." The Furkoi silence that followed was the kind of silence that happens when everyone realizes they might be the dumbest person in the room. "You can hear water from 40 meters away?" Jakar asked, his translator struggling with his tone of disbelief. "Yeah, you can't?" Emma was already walking toward the tree line. "Okay, first things first. We need fire, shelter, and weapons. Probably in that order. Anyone know how long until the rescue beacon from the main ship registers our missing check-in?" 72 standard hours, Instructor Ven replied, assuming they can navigate the storm system. "So, 3 days. Cool. That's plenty of time." Emma cracked her knuckles in a way that made several cadets flinch. "Who wants to learn how to make fire without a plasma torch?" "That's impossible," Kreechaw said flatly. "Fire requires an ignition source. We have no power cells, no thermal igniters, and no chemical accelerants. Emma's grin widened, and Commander Zixthor felt his earlier sense of dread intensify. "Oh, you sweet summer alien. Let me tell you about friction." What followed was approximately 15 minutes of Emma explaining the bow drill method while simultaneously gathering materials. She spoke with the casual confidence of someone explaining how to make a sandwich, except the sandwich was fire, and the kitchen was a hostile alien planet. "See? You just need a spindle, a fireboard, a bow, and a socket," she said, stripping bark from a branch with a sharp rock she'd found in about 30 seconds. "The spindle is this straight piece here. The fireboard is this flat piece. The bow is, well, a bow. And the socket is just something to put pressure on top. And this creates fire," Mora said skeptically, her telepathic twin nodding in synchronized doubt. "Through the power of being annoying," Emma confirmed. "You basically just rotate this stick really, really fast against this board until friction creates an ember hot enough to ignite tinder. It's like the universe's worst customer service experience. If you keep applying pressure and refuse to give up, eventually something catches fire." "That seems impossibly primitive," Ven observed. "Yeah, well, my species spent about 99% of its existence being impossibly primitive," Emma said cheerfully. She was now using 2 rocks to create what she called a hand-drilled divot in her fireboard. The sound of stone on wood was rhythmic and somehow threatening. "We got really good at it. There are humans who do this stuff for fun now. We call them bushcrafters, or that weird uncle who lives in Montana. But surely your species had fire for thousands of cycles," Jakar protested. "Why would you continue practicing these obsolete skills?" Emma looked up, and there was something almost predatory in her expression. "Because you never know when you're going to be stranded on an alien planet with a bunch of panicking cadets who think technology is the only answer to survival." "Touché," the narrator would say if the narrator were allowed to editorialize. But the narrator is definitely editorializing anyway. 20 minutes later, Emma had assembled her bow drill. It looked like something a child might make from garbage, which several of the cadets quietly thought, but were too polite to say. The bow was a curved branch with what Emma had called improvised cordage, strung between the ends, which was actually just plant fibers she'd twisted together, while explaining that humans used to make rope out of literally everything, including their own hair when they were desperate, which was often. "Now, the key is consistent speed and downward pressure," Emma explained, positioning her apparatus over a small nest of dried grass and bark shavings she'd prepared. "You're not trying to go fast, you're trying to go steady. It's like most things in life. Consistent effort beats sporadic enthusiasm." "Is she always this philosophical about survival?" Kreechaw whispered to Commander Zixthor. "I have no idea, but I'm concerned she's done this before." Emma began working the bow back and forth, the spindle whirring against the fireboard with increasing speed. Smoke began to rise almost immediately, which caused half the cadets to gasp like they were watching a magic show. Which, to be fair, from their perspective, they absolutely were. "The smoke means we're getting friction heat," Emma narrated, not breaking her rhythm. "Soon we'll get an ember. Then we take that ember, transfer it to the tinder bundle, blow on it gently like you're trying to convince your career to take off, and boom, fire." 2 minutes later, an actual ember glowed in the notch she'd carved. Emma carefully transferred it to her tinder bundle and began blowing on it with the kind of gentle, patient breath that suggested she'd done this more than once or twice. The tinder bundle began to smoke, Then it began to glow. Then, with a soft whoosh that made everyone jump, it burst into flame. Emma held up the burning bundle like it was a trophy. And that, my friends, is how humans conquered their planet. Applied stubbornness and a refusal to accept that anything is impossible. The cadets stared. Instructor Venn stared. Commander Zixthor stared so hard his compound eyes began to hurt. "Okay," Emma said, carefully transferring the flame to a larger pile of kindling she'd prepared. "Who wants to learn how to make rope?" It turned out that watching Emma make rope was somehow more disturbing than watching her make fire. She found a cluster of what she identified as probably some kind of nettle or flax equivalent, and proceeded to process it through a series of steps that involved stripping, retting, which apparently just meant letting it sit in water, drying, and then beating it with rocks until the fibers separated. "This is actually the fast version," she explained while demonstrating a reverse wrap technique that created surprisingly strong cordage from loose plant fibers. "Normally, you'd want to ret this for a week or so, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Plus, we can improve our rope situation as we go. Always be optimizing. That's what my wilderness instructor used to say. Right before he made us eat bugs." "Eat bugs?" Vora asked, horrified. "Oh yeah, bugs are a great protein source. These actually look similar to earth grasshoppers, which means they're probably edible if you cook them." Emma pointed at some insect-like creatures hopping through the grass. "You just pull off the legs and wings, toast them over the fire, and boom. Survival snacks." The sound of 12 different species trying not to vomit would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. While Emma continued producing rope at a speed that suggested she might have actually been a rope-making machine in disguise, some of the braver cadets started asking questions. "How do you know all this?" Jakar asked. "Honestly, boredom and spite," Emma said. "Growing up on a space station is super boring. So I downloaded every survival manual I could find and practiced whenever we had planet leave. Then, when I joined the coalition, some Velkari recruit told me humans were too dependent on technology to survive in nature. And I got mad enough to prove them wrong." Instructor Venn had the grace to look slightly embarrassed, probably because she'd said something similar in a tactics briefing. "But this is ancient knowledge," Kreechaw protested. "Surely your species moved beyond this." "Oh, we absolutely did," Emma agreed, now braiding multiple strands of cordage into a thicker rope. "We've got nanofabricators and portable fusion reactors and all that good stuff. But here's the thing about humans. We remember. We keep the old knowledge around because we learned the hard way that sometimes the advanced stuff breaks. And when it does, you better know how to make fire with sticks or you're going to have a bad time." "That seems paranoid," Mara observed. "It's only paranoia if you're wrong," Emma countered. "And considering we're currently stranded on an alien planet with no technology, I'm feeling pretty vindicated right now." She finished her first length of proper rope and tested it by trying to snap it. When it held firm, she nodded with satisfaction. "Okay, this is good for about 50 kilos of tension. Not great, but definitely enough for what we need next." "Which is?" Commander Zixthor asked, though part of him didn't want to know. Emma's eyes gleamed. "Spears." The thing about watching Emma make spears was that it really drove home how creative humans could get about poking things from a distance. She selected long, straight branches, stripped them, sharpened the ends with her slowly growing collection of sharp rocks, and then did something that made everyone deeply uncomfortable. She started fire-hardening the tips. "See, wood is pretty soft when it's fresh," she explained, slowly rotating a spear tip over the fire. But if you char it slightly and harden it with heat, it becomes much tougher. Won't be as good as steel, but it'll definitely ruin someone's day. The key is to not burn it, just harden it. Like toasting marshmallows, but with more potential for violence. You compare everything to food, Creechaw noted. I'm hungry and we've been here for 3 hours, Emma said defensively. Speaking of which, once I'm done with these spears, I'm setting up some snares and maybe a fish trap if that stream has anything interesting. You know how to catch fish without equipment? Ben asked. I know how to catch fish with my bare hands if I have to, but that's really inefficient, Emma said. Better to make a weird trap. You just build a V-shaped barrier in the water, narrow end downstream, and the fish swim in but can't figure out how to swim back out. Fish are surprisingly dumb. Present company excluded, she added, nodding at Creechaw, whose species had evolved from aquatic ancestors. By the time the local planet's sun was setting, a process Emma had timed and used to determine they were probably at about 45 degrees latitude, the humans had transformed the clearing from crash site to surprisingly functional primitive camp. There was a fire burning in a proper fire pit that Emma had ringed with stones for heat retention and safety. There was a lean-to shelter constructed from branches, leaves, and the cordage Emma had made. Large enough to fit everyone with some creative arrangement. There were 6 spears, each about 2 meters long, fire-hardened and surprisingly balanced. There was a stack of firewood that Emma had insisted they gather, because fire maintenance is easier than fire creation. And there was a neat pile of what Emma called natural resources, that included various rocks, plant fibers, and some clay she'd found near the stream, because you never know when you'll need pottery. The cadets sat around the fire, watching Emma work on her next project, making bark containers for water collection. How are you not exhausted? Maura finally asked. You've been working non-stop since we crashed. Emma looked up, and for the first time, they saw something almost vulnerable in her expression. Honestly, I'm terrified, she admitted, like super scared. But my grandma always said that the best cure for fear is work. If you're busy solving problems, you don't have time to panic about them. Plus, all of you were panicking enough for the whole group. So I figured someone should probably focus on the not dying part. That is remarkably pragmatic, Instructor Venn said. Yeah, well, humans are good at pragmatism when the alternative is death, Emma said. We spent most of our evolutionary history being medium-sized prey animals who had to outthink everything that wanted to eat us. We got really good at making tools, finding solutions, and stubbornly refusing to die. It's kind of our whole thing. Commander Zixthor, who had been mostly silent while processing the fact that a human cadet was significantly better at survival than he was, finally spoke up. Cadet Chen, I owe you an apology. I believe the standard coalition assessment that humans were technologically dependent and relatively fragile. I mean, we are pretty fragile, Emma said. We're squishy, we overheat easily. We need a weirdly specific range of conditions to survive. And we're basically just bags of meat held together by sheer determination. But that fragility made us creative. When you can't outfight a predator, you outthink it. When you can't survive the environment, you change the environment. That's what all this is. She gestured at the camp. We're not surviving in nature, we're making nature work for us. That's actually terrifying, Jakar said. Thanks, Emma said cheerfully. As the night deepened, Emma taught interested cadets how to maintain the fire, how to identify the direction of prevailing winds by watching the trees, how to find water by looking for game trails and convergent insect activity. and approximately 15 other survival techniques that most species had forgotten the moment they invented central heating. Creechaw, who had initially been the most skeptical, was now taking notes on a piece of bark using charcoal from the fire. "This is actually fascinating," she admitted. "We lost all this knowledge generations ago when we achieved spaceflight. It never occurred to us that we might need it again." "That's the thing about progress," Emma said, "working on improving their shelter's waterproofing by layering additional bark shingles. It's great until it isn't. Every piece of technology is just one disaster away from being useless. But knowledge, skills, those are portable. Those are redundant. You can't break the ability to make fire, you can only forget it. And humans are really, really bad at forgetting things. We've got people who still practice ancient martial arts for fun, people who recreate historical clothing using historical methods, people who make medieval armor in their garages just because they can. We keep the old knowledge alive, even when we don't need it. Because somewhere deep in our cultural DNA, we remember what it's like to need it and not have it. That's why you practice this, Ven realized. Not because you expected to need it, but because you might need it. Exactly, Emma confirmed. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, and always know how to make fire. It's basically the human motto, right after, "Hold my beer, I've got an idea." The night passed surprisingly well, all things considered. Emma had set up a watch rotation. Because we don't know what kind of predators this planet has, and I'd rather not find out by being eaten, which everyone agreed was sensible. The fire was maintained, the shelter held against a light rain that started around midnight, and nobody died. By morning, Emma had already improved their situation even further. She checked her snares, caught 2 rabbit-like creatures, started a separate smoking fire to preserve meat, and was working on what she described as atlatl, which was apparently an ancient human spear-throwing device that increased range and power. "It's basically a lever for your arm," she explained while demonstrating. "Doubles the effective force and distance you can throw a spear. Humans invented these like 30,000 years ago. We've been finding creative ways to poke things from farther away for a really long time." "Your species spent 30,000 years perfecting spear technology?" Jakar asked. "Oh, we spent way longer than that," Emma said. "These are just the fancy versions. We've been using pointy sticks since before we were technically even human. Homo erectus was doing it almost 2 million years ago." The casual way she dropped timescales that long made everyone vaguely uncomfortable. Day 2 involved Emma teaching anyone interested how to improve their rope, how to make better cordage from different plants, how to create proper cutting tools by knapping flint. Kamerkanya, it's like really aggressive puzzle solving where the puzzle can cut you. And how to set up a proper rainwater collection system using bark containers and hollowed logs. She also started working on quality of life improvements, which included making bark shoes for those whose footwear had been damaged in the crash, creating a basic latrine system. Because sanitation is important and dysentery is not fun, and even making a crude bow for hunting. "You know how to make a bow too?" Mora asked, watching Emma test the pull strength on her creation. "It's not that different from the bow drill," Emma explained. "Just bigger and designed to throw smaller sticks really fast. The principles are basically the same. Flexible wood, good cordage, proper tension. Humans have been making these for at least 60,000 years. They're honest, reliable technology." "Do humans have ancient technology for everything?" Vora asked. "Pretty much," Emma confirmed. "If you can name a problem, humans probably invented a low-tech solution for it at some point. Food preservation, we've got smoking, salting, drying, fermenting, and pickling. Water storage, pottery, bark containers, hollowed gourds, animal bladders. Cutting things? Stone tools, bone tools, wooden tools, shell tools. We've tried everything, and we remember what worked. By the afternoon of day 2, they had a functioning camp that would have made any anthropologist weep with joy. The shelter had been expanded and improved. The fire was reliably maintained. They had a steady supply of clean water, and Emma had successfully hunted a bird analog with her bow, providing fresh meat for the group. This is better than some of the assigned base camps I've stayed at, Commander Zixthor admitted, watching Emma demonstrate how to smoke meat properly. That's because those base camps rely on technology that can break, Emma said. This relies on principles of physics and biology that can't break. Fire will always produce heat and smoke. Meat will always preserve better when dried. Cordage will always be useful. These are universal constants. You make primitive survival sound almost philosophical, Instructor Venn observed. That's because it is, Emma said. Every one of these skills exists because some human, somewhere, at some point, had a problem and refused to die about it. They thought, they experimented, they tried things, they passed on knowledge. This isn't just survival. It's the accumulated wisdom of millions of humans across hundreds of thousands of years, all saying the same thing. We can figure this out. Day 3 arrived with a beautiful sunrise that Emma immediately used to orient their camp and predict weather patterns. Because the color of the sky tells you about atmospheric conditions, and red sky in morning means sailors take warning. Sailors? Creechaw asked. Humans who travel on water in boats, Emma explained. Another ancient profession we kept around because boats are still useful. We've got everything from hollowed-out logs to nuclear-powered aircraft carriers. Same basic principle, different scales. She was working on what she called insurance projects, which apparently meant making backup tools and additional supplies. Because redundancy is the difference between inconvenience and catastrophe. It was mid-afternoon on day 3 when the rescue ship finally arrived, its engines a welcome roar overhead. As the dropship descended, Emma was demonstrating how to make fish hooks from thorns and teaching Jakar the finer points of net weaving. The rescue team, led by Captain Thorne, a grizzled Dravian veteran, stepped out of the ship and stopped dead at the sight of the camp. "What in the 7 hells happened here?" Thorne demanded. "We expected to find survivors, not a historical reenactment village." "Cadet Chen happened," Commander Zixthor said, and there was something like awe in his voice. "She happened very, very thoroughly." Captain Thorne looked at Emma, who was currently wearing a bark fiber vest she'd woven that morning for extra pockets, holding a spear in one hand and a crude but functional bow in the other, with what appeared to be a knife made from a sharpened stone tucked into her makeshift belt. "Cadet, why do you look like you're about to single-handedly restart civilization?" Emma blinked. I was just making sure nobody died. That seemed important." "She made fire without tools," Morris said. "And rope from plants," Vora added. "And spears," Jakar contributed. "And shelter, and tools. And she caught food, and she taught us everything," Creechaw finished, holding up her bark notebook covered in survival notes. Captain Thorne turned back to Emma. "And this is all from memory." I practiced a lot," Emma said modestly. "My grandma always said that knowledge weighs nothing and takes up no space, so you might as well fill your head with useful things." "Your grandmother sounds terrifying," Thorne said. "She survived the Yukon winter in a crashed transport with nothing but a pocket knife and attitude," Emma said. "She was amazing." "That explains so much," Thorne muttered. Then louder, "All right, Pack up what you can carry. Command is going to want a full report, and honestly, I want to see if anyone believes this story. As the cadets gathered their meager possessions, and Emma carefully disassembled her bow to bring back "because waste not, want not," Instructor Ven pulled Emma aside. "Cadet Chen, I owe you more than an apology," she said quietly. "I've been teaching survival for 20 cycles, and I've never seen anyone adapt so completely to a crisis situation. You didn't just survive, you thrived." "I just did what humans do," Emma said. "We're pretty good at not dying. It's kind of our superpower." "No," Ven corrected. "Your superpower is that you see resources where others see nothing. You see possibilities where others see problems. You see solutions where others see obstacles. That's not just survival, that's mastery." Emma considered this. "Huh. I guess when you put it that way, it sounds pretty cool. But honestly, any human could have done this. We're all carrying around the same basic knowledge. Most people just never need to use it." "That's what makes it remarkable," Ven said. "You carry the knowledge just in case. Your entire species prepares for disasters that might never come." "Well, yeah," Emma said. "This disaster did come. Kind of validates the whole approach, doesn't it?" On the flight back to the main ship, the cadets were unusually quiet, processing their 3-day crash course in human adaptability. Emma had fallen asleep almost immediately, exhausted from 3 days of basically single-handedly keeping everyone alive while teaching survival seminars. "So," Captain Thorne said to Commander Zixthor, "what did we learn?" "That humans are terrifying," Zixthor said immediately. "Also that we need to completely revise our survival training protocols, and possibly add a mandatory course on primitive skills. And maybe we should just put a human on every away team as insurance. The Coalition is going to have questions about how one human cadet outperformed the entire survival training program," Thorne observed. "The Coalition can ask those questions to Cadet Chen," Zixthor said. "I'm sure she'll give them a very thorough answer, possibly while making rope from their shoelaces." In her seat, Emma smiled in her sleep, probably dreaming of increasingly elaborate survival scenarios. And somewhere in the Coalition military bureaucracy, someone was about to have a very interesting conversation about updating their training manuals to include a chapter titled, "What to Do When You Realize Humans Can Make Literally Anything from Sticks and Spite." Because if there was one thing humanity had taught the galaxy, it was this: never bet against the species that learned to throw rocks really, really well and then decided to get creative about it. 3 weeks later, Emma was promoted to Survival Training Specialist and assigned to develop a new curriculum that she titled Advanced Primitive Technologies for Modern Personnel. Her first class had a wait list of over 300 cadets from 40 different species. She taught it wearing her bark vest because at this point, it was basically a power move. And somewhere, her grandmother was probably laughing, because of course, her granddaughter had turned a survival situation into a teaching opportunity. That's what humans did, after all. They survived. They adapted. They thrived. They shared. And they absolutely, definitely, never forgot how to make fire with sticks. Because you just never knew when you'd need it. The end.